Okay, we're officially starting Why Magic Rule 6. Rule 6 is one of the shortest ones, but it's quite an interesting one. We're leaving Rule 5. Let me just read what we're leaving because this took us quite a while to get through it. Maybe the longest one in the whole batch. Three things engage the solar angel before the sheath created passes downward: the condition of the waters, the safety of the one who thus creates, and steady contemplation. Thus are the heart, the throat, and the eye aligned for triple service. Okay, so we have the heart, these three centers: the heart, the throat, and the eye. And the eye is symbolized by the third eye, which is in the center of the forehead, and the crown at the top. The interplay between those two form that part, which is aligned with the heart, which is centered on love, wisdom, and the throat, centered on the creative energies of the soul. Now we're moving over to, in Rule 6, it puts the focus on the third eye, the center between the forehead. And when you think of the center between the forehead, it always has an interplay with the crown chakra at the top of the head. And Rule 6 reads as follows: the devas of the lower four feel the force when the eye opens. They're driven forth and lose their master. Okay, first of all, it's important we understand two things about this as we continue. First of all, what a deva or diva is, depending on how you want to pronounce it, and the lower four. Who can tell us what a deva is?
Well, Deva is part of the angelic chain of evolution, starting from the elemental essence all the way up to the archangels.
Okay, that's very good. And so they're the feminine aspect of creation, and we're the humans are the masculine aspect of creation, of intelligent creation that manifests here upon the earth. The Advent tells us there are 60 billion human monads, and there are 140 billion deva monads. And so I think a lot of the deva monads are over quite a number of life forms, but the deva monads are manifest mainly in the etheric world. The humans manifest in the lower physical. That's not where the devas are. They aren't in the lower physical. They are in etheric matter. That's why we don't normally see them with the physical eyes. But they come in all different grades. They come in grades of lives going through the involutionary stage that haven't reached human. And then there are other lives that have passed through the human, become very advanced, and then enter into the Deva kingdom. And these are these are like what is in Christianity called archangels, or highly angelic beings. The purpose of the Deva lives is to work with the elements and to control them. And even with the advanced devas or angels, they work with the elements, and this is kind of taught in the book of Revelations. There's several groups of angels in the book of Revelations. One, the seven angels sounding the seven trumpets, and then you have the four angels holding the four winds of the earth, which are in control of the elements that determine when humanity suffers destruction and when they don't. So these great angels, the ones holding the four winds, are over the elements of the earth, which determine when different calamities will happen. And the calamities are released upon humanity depending on the karma. So there are these four great angels that are over the four winds of the earth, or the four elements that control um, uh, our weather and all kinds of things, are Deva agents. that are pretty much, like I said, agents of karma. Now, the 7 angels are also apparently angels of karma because they dispense different calamities on the earth. Now, I'm sure other angels are dispensive of good news, like the ones that appeared at the time of Christ to the shepherds, singing of a time when there would be goodwill towards men, peace on earth. So it's not all bad news, but apparently many different Deva angels are appointed to oversee the actual elements of the earth that determine what the earth is going to do when different things on the earth happen. Oh, Lorraine says, is it pronounced diva or deva? I've never heard. Do you know, Edward? You've been in different classes. How do other people pronounce the word?
Well, they're called devas.
I've always used deva, but so yeah, we'll go with that.
Well, divas are usually female singers in the opera.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, now the second thing is it says the devas are the lower 4 feel the force when the eye opens. Any idea what the lower 4 is? Anybody? Okay, the lower 4 would be the lower quaternary. Anyone ever heard that term before, the lower quaternary?
Right. It all contained within our persona, the physical, the etheric, the astral, the lower mind.
Right. Those are the three main ones: the mental self, the astral emotional self, the physical etheric, and then the prana is the 4th part of the lower quaternary. But it's the prana, which is the life force from the earth and the sun that works through different parts of our body that we would often call like um, um, energy points in our body. In addition to the centers, they work through the centers, and we have all kinds of different acupuncture points, so to speak, in our body that the prana works through, and that's the force. So that's called the lower quaternary, and there's lower deva lives connected with these. Now the deva lives is the lower 4 are different from those who pass through the human kingdom. So these are all deva lives on the path of involution, not evolution. They're the ones that are descended into matter and are responsible for influencing matter. Now, the higher devas have power to command things to happen with matter, but the lower devas are different than the higher devas. Anyone have any idea how they'd be different?
They're evolutionary. They've gone through the involutionaries, and they're on the way back to the highest.
Right, that's the higher devas, but the lower devas are involutionary, and they have to be commanded. Okay, so the lower devas in you are subject to your commands, and if you're not in control of yourself, what do?
They can't take a joke. They do whatever you're thinking.
Right, right. They follow kind of wayward thoughts, wayward impulses. If you're not directing yourself properly, they pretty much run out of control. And let's say you get angry. If you ever get really angry, you can feel the deva lives there. They're actually there, just like a life form. And have you ever got really angry, and then after you calm down, you still feel the residual effect? That's those deva lives were energized by that anger. So what you have to do with these deva lives is assume control of them. And when and the main way to assume control is the opening of the third eye. It says these lower devas feel the force when the eye opens. Okay, so when your eye begins to be stimulated, when your third eye, it's called your ajna center, begins to be stimulated, then these lower lives that have controlled you for many, many lifetimes, they are affected, and they're now controlled, and they're driven forth, and they lose their master. Now, what happens when they lose their master? They're replaced by something else. And so we'll start with DK's explanation of this. Okay, his explanation, it's headlined called The Work of the Eye. And the importance of this rule, he says, is found in contemplation. I've often said that contemplation is the highest form of meditation, because meditation alone takes you so far. You have to reach a point to where you have seed thoughts that you contemplate and ideas that you contemplate. The greatest things to contemplate come down from the intuitive levels. Now, the intuitive plane is above the mind, and it's feminine, and it's receiving. So if the disciple tunes in the intuitive plane, then the intuitive plane is a ladder that goes up to the atmic plane, and the atmic plane is the plane of ideas. So if the disciple steps up, focuses on this intuitive plane, he then has access to ideas, brings them down, and then once you bring something down, then what's really important is to contemplate it. When you contemplate these higher ideas, it will help to develop the ajna center, or the third eye. And so this is why contemplation is so important, is just accessing the vibes of the various planes takes you so far. And then, but it's up to contemplation to take you further. Dan, did you have a question?
Yeah, but the contemplation, the point at which that occurs, it's after the stimulation from on high, not to generate the stimulation, but after you get stimulated, then you contemplate.
Well, you can't really have too much contemplation, but you can contemplate just reading a book, and you read something interesting and you contemplate what's there. But and each step you take in contemplation, followed by meditation and thought, and then more contemplation. It's like steps. But the most important contemplation is when the disciple accesses the intuitive plane and brings down ideas from a higher plane. If he gets those ideas, it's important that he contemplate them. And oftentimes you'll get these just as you're in between being asleep and awake in the morning, and something will come to you. And you'll find that if you don't seize it, you'll and just think it'll be there in an hour after you eat breakfast, and it's just gone. So when these things come to you, and it can often happen to you in the middle of the day. Maybe you're just driving along in your car and let your mind go blank, and something just comes to you. These things from the higher planes, when they do come to you, are very ephemeral, and you have to value them when they come. And if you're not in a situation where you can write it down, then put it in your brain memory and say it over and over, and make sure it registers so you can write it down, or secure it in your memory later. So contemplation is important. It's an important step no matter where you are on the point of evolution. If you're just a little kid daydreaming about stuff, that's kind of a form of contemplation right there. But it's important that you always include that step. Any other question there?
No, I think that gets it. I would just, if you were to use a seed thought or a seed starter for contemplation, It just seemed like that would have to occur before whatever you want to call it, the inspiration comes, which you would then have to contemplate again. Is that what you're saying?
Right. The seed thoughts are really good. That's why I'm finishing up the Seeker's Guide with all these seed thoughts, because seed thoughts are one of the things that anyone, no matter where he is along the path, can plant in his mind and think about. So, all of us can do that. So I think that's a really good way to wind it up. But those that are really diligent about this, when they're contemplating these seed thoughts, and if they're really thinking about it deeply, will have other things come to them. And when those other things come, it's important that they use the principle of contemplation and see how high they can go with it.
Yeah, I just kind of my issue that I need to kind of think about for a while is that I always thought of contemplation as the act of throwing the seed thought out there and then waiting for something or trying to generate some kind of response, which is not really what you're saying. You're saying after you get the response, then you need to contemplate that so that you lock it in and don't forget it or whatever. Which yeah, you answered my question, so thanks.
Yeah, DK makes this comment. He says, to contemplate involves steady vision, a one-pointedly directed towards a specific objective. The soul or solar angel might be regarded, he says, as he exercises his contemplation in 3 different directions that we're going to talk about. But now, what's interesting about the soul contemplating in 3 different directions is that he says that one thing is important for a disciple to learn is to do more than one thing at a time. Now, he said that's not necessarily the way people are thinking about, like multitasking. He says that's not necessarily what he's talking about, but to function on more than one plane at a time. This is kind of illustrated a little bit in the words of Jesus, where he told his disciples to be in the world, but not of the world. In other words, maintain your consciousness in the world enough so you can make a living and take care of your family and do stuff like that, but also have a consciousness in the other world. So have your consciousness be a dweller on 2 planets, so to speak. But he says we should be able to go beyond that to have our consciousness on at least 3 planes: the physical, the astral, and the mental. So have an awareness of all those 3 planes at one time. And many people just keep their awareness on one plane, either the physical or the astral, emotional. It's comfortable to just keep a person's consciousness at one plane. But then above the mental, of course, is the higher planes, and we can even access that in our consciousness to a degree. Okay, it says the solar angel gazes in 3 different directions. The first direction is, he calls it the light supernal, toward the central life or energy which holds hid within itself the purpose and plan toward which all being tends. And he talks about the secret of being is only revealed to advanced initiates. So it's interesting, the knowledge that we're connected with a higher self. And the higher self functions in its own world that's totally separate from our functioning here. It's a little bit like, looking at it this way, your dream self functions in a world totally different than the world you're in right now. They're 2 totally separate, distinct worlds. And the same thing with the world that is above us. Our higher self, which is dreaming about us, functions and has its own life and its own sphere of which we're totally unaware. Just like when you're dreaming, you're unaware of what your life is like in your regular world, but it's still you. You are still a part of that world even when you're dreaming. Okay, so the soul itself looks toward its higher self, and the soul's higher self is the monad, which is linked directly to the one life, which is God. And so the soul itself is seeking to understand more completely what the whole purpose of the whole creation is. And it's trying to understand itself and trying to use that knowledge to send impulses to you to go in the direction which will fulfill the will of God. Okay, the second direction the soul looks is he looks in his own world, which is called the world of souls. And he looks in the world of the hierarchy, the spiritual hierarchy of the masters. And he dwells in vibration, which is pure thought. And this is what Jesus talked about as the kingdom of God, is where your higher self actually dwells. Your higher self actually dwells in the kingdom of God. And we become members of the kingdom of God when we become one with our own souls. He said, let it not be forgotten that the spiritual man, the solar angel, has his own goal of endeavor, and this becomes the predominant impulse once the lower man controls the personality. So that's our goal. The lower person has to control the personality. In other words, he has to control these devas of the lower four. And when that happens, then he can become one with the soul. Dan, are you raising your hand again? Or is that an old message?
I've got a question.
Oh, okay.
Who is doing the meditating? I mean, I know I'm the one that does the contemplating, but I got in trouble this week because I don't know anything whatsoever about. Somebody was saying you have to meditate in order to get to any place, you know. And it's like, I've never meditated. I don't know what it is. And every time I've ever asked anybody, how do you do that? They just want to hypnotize you. Like, you know what I'm saying? I never did learn to meditate, and I got people that are condemning me for, you know, I just don't know. I contemplate fine, but
well, contemplation is a form of meditation. Now, one thing the DK said about that is the Western world, the approach of the Western man is a lot different than that in the East. And he points out that even a business person operating his business is undergoing a form of meditation that's different from the East, but adjusted to what he is doing. Now, this doesn't mean that we should never go into that point of silence and receptivity of a standard meditation, but many people do quite a bit of meditation and contemplation without going into that state where they're completely still and so I know you're always thinking, and so you're thinking so much with all these ideas that you come up with that you're definitely undergoing a form of meditation. So what you need to do is just check with your soul. If your soul tells you to that you should undergo different forms of meditation, do it. If your soul is comfortable with what you're doing now, then go with it. Each of us is different with different needs. Edward, you had something to say.
Well, first of all, it says in the Bible, be still and know. You have to be still. You have to, it says, go into the upper room, which is that tune cavity between the pituitary and the pineal gland. You be still and focus. You can't have an overactive mind. Like in the previous chapters, it says the mind slays the real.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation is mediation with your parent being. It's mediation which requires you to first be still and listen.
Right, right. And a person can be still in a number of different circumstances.
You can't be still if your lower mind is constantly like a squirrel in a cage going around and around. It's not possible to meditate.
But I've found that some of my greatest moments come, it's always in a point of stillness, but oftentimes my greatest insights have come when I've been still, just maybe just driving down the road and my mind was just completely blank.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Right, and then something comes into it. So sometimes that stillness occurs naturally. And that may happen with Rick, because I know he gets a lot of ideas. And I would guess that the ideas come to Rick at a point where his mind just kind of stills itself kind of naturally, since he doesn't do a standard meditation. What do you think about that, Rick? Does that sound right, or what do you think?
I think my form of contemplation or meditation is basically I'm asking questions that only God knows the answer to, and I keep asking until I get an answer, and I just don't know what the heck anybody's talking about. Empty your mind out. It's like, that's where I'm asking these questions, right there in the pituitary, right, in the pineal.
Yeah, but isn't there times you ask the question and then kind of not thinking of anything, and then something comes into your mind? Don't you have that happen sometimes?
After you ask, it makes perfect sense. If you're asking a question, shut up long enough to hear the answer, because it will.
Right.
But if you're busy talking or asking the next question, you're going to miss the answer. So yeah, there is a time to shut up.
Now, there's certain things you'll only access through standard meditation, like if you want to read the Akashic records or something like that, then you have to put a lot of attention on different meditation techniques. But to access the world of ideas, you just have to, you can empty your mind in pretty much standard situations. Okay, any other comments or questions?
Well, one of the meditation teachers said that you have to go into meditation with the idea, I don't know. I come here, I don't know, I want to know.
Yeah, yeah. In other words, be as a little child so you can enter the kingdom of God, right? Little child doesn't really know anything. And so that's a good point. Okay, we've established the soul looks upward to a higher vibration than himself, and then he looks upon his own kingdom and absorbs what it can, and then he looks one more direction. What's that third direction?
Looks to his vehicle.
Right, he looks down to his shadow, which is us, or his creation, which is us. And so he looks toward his reflection to try to take the knowledge he has to guide it and give it revelation, which we're the biggest obstructionists to that. We're kind of dense, and so sometimes the soul has to take great measures to get our attention. But it's always looking for opportunities to get our attention. But for many lifetimes, we go through a period where we're just oblivious to the soul. And the soul realizes this, but then the time comes where we begin to wake up. And when we begin to wake up from our dreams, so to speak, then the soul starts to pay attention to us and give us guidance so that we can be lifted up from earth to heaven, so to speak. Okay. These three directions, he says, correspond to the three major centers, which would be the heart, the throat, and the eye or the head center. The center between the eyebrows is the focus of the eye that we're talking about in this. And this is the main medium the soul uses to communicate with his instrument, and we as the personality are called the instrument. By instrument, it means us in the physical, our emotional self, and our minds. These all compose what he calls the personality. And he says it's often related to the pineal gland or the pituitary gland. These two glands control the head center, but he says that they're just manifestations. They are not actually the center themselves, but they are these two glands influence the two head centers.
In the Cederkranz work, they talk about the etheric tune cavity between the pituitary and the pineal gland, which is a receiver transmitter.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the physical brain isn't really the mind, but it is an aid for the mind in helping us to function in this world. And but after we die and our brain is gone, we still will have mind. And the third eye, he says, manifests not only in the physical through the pituitary gland, but it also functions in the astral. It says it has a location in the astral body, and it has a location in the mental body. So the soul uses the third eye as the eye of vision to see what you're thinking and to understand what you're feeling and to see what you're actually seeing in the physical world. And so this is a mechanism. Once the third eye is open, it opens a link between us and the soul, so the soul can see what's happening. It's a little bit like vivid dreaming, I guess you could say, or that you some people are able to enter their dream world and be conscious about it. So the soul eventually reaches a point where it can, when the third eye is open, it can share consciousness with us. Whereas when we're before the third eye is open, it isn't able to pay a lot of attention to what is going on in our world. So that's interesting to think about. Okay, we try to control the lower nature. And what is the soul correspondingly doing? Okay, we try to control our lower nature, don't we? So what is the soul trying to control? He says, just as a fully intelligent being can only begin to consciously function as a soul and to contact the kingdom of the soul, so only the fully and active dominant soul, in which the Buddhic principle is potentially controlling, can begin to contact the state of pure being in which the monad or spirit eternally rests. So this is interesting. So we're down here, we're trying to control our lower self so that we can be more in tune with the soul which dwells in the kingdom of heaven. Well, the soul, on the other hand, is trying to access the higher part of itself, which is the monad, that originating intelligence which is linked to God itself and the source of all knowledge. So it's trying to link itself, he says, through the Buddhic principle. And the Buddhic principle is the one above the plane of the mind. Now, the soul body is composed of higher mental substance from the plane of the mind. So it actually has a body composed of the I believe it's the third and fourth ether on the mental plane is what the causal body is composed of, if I remember right. So, and so it actually has a body composed of this mental substance, just like we have a body composed of physical substance, and it's trying to access the first formless world. The higher worlds, the Buddhic, the Atmic, the monadic, and the divine, those higher four planes are called the formless worlds. But they're formless because they don't have forms composed of substance. They are the originator of forms, though. And forms dwell there as ideas rather than substance. So they are called formless worlds, but they're still worlds composed of vibration and energy. So something like that's hard to get a handle on. It's hard to get a handle for people on what the soul may be trying to access. But the soul is trying to access the higher part of itself so that it can get in touch with a higher, a more clear idea of where a higher will is sending, is orchestrating everything to be arranged, to make sure that it can send down to you the right instructions, the right guidance. So everything is linked to a great chain. Now he says the development of intellect in man marks his fitness for the work of treading the path back to full consciousness. The development of the Buddhic or the wisdom love aspect in the solar angel demonstrates his fitness to go further in progression in awareness of the state of pure being. So he says a human being, what he has to develop is the mind. And he says in the introduction to all of his works, the plane of the mind, the plane whereon the masters may be found. And the higher mind is the link between everything higher and lower for humanity. And he says the link for the solar angel is the Buddhic plane, and he's progressing on his levels and struggling on his level to move ahead, just as we are struggling on our level to move ahead. So it's kind of interesting. So the soul looks downward toward his reflection and tries to get it to respond. He says, just as a physical eye came into being in response to the light of the sun, so the spiritual eye equally comes into being in response to what? Hey, you go back to the primitive forms, and they didn't even, bacteria and stuff like that didn't even have eyes. But then the primitive forms start to establish they had elementary eyes, and then as life evolved on the earth, life began to respond to the light of the sun by developing vision. We developed hearing by responding to sound. We developed taste by responding to food. We developed smell by responding to the way things smelled, flowers and different things. So he says all of our senses evolved in the physical world in response to stimuli. And he says the soul is doing the same thing, and our response to the soul is a new type of stimulation. So our physical eye came into manifestation so that we could see the light that was there. Something in us realized we needed to have vision, so we developed that vision. Now, on the other hand, something within us is sensing another type of light. What eye do we see this other light with?
Would be the third eye.
Right, the third eye, the eye between the eyebrows, the center between the eyebrows, is a source of vision to see higher things. Do we see them the same way that we see things with our physical eyes?
No, we see the color, we see the vibration, we see some vague color and vibration.
Right, we will see colors and we will see some light, but in addition to that, we see with the eyes of understanding. In other words, a third eye will aid us in understanding higher principles. And this is a type of vision that's a higher correspondence to physical vision. And we can also generate a certain amount of vision as we understand it on the physical plane. It's possible to actually see visions and to see the things on the Akashic records. But the main thing is to develop the eye of understanding. If two people see with the eye of understanding, then they will be one. Because one soul revealing truth will not give a different contrary information to another soul revealing truth. So two people with looking through the eyes of understanding will see as one. And they may interpret it a little bit different on the physical plane, but they will get basically the same information. Like two people witnessing an event. They both see the same thing. They may describe it a little different, but they won't argue over what color some guy shirt was if it was definitely red. They will both see red. And the same thing with looking through the eyes of understanding of the soul. There's certain things that they won't argue about. It just really maybe small details of interpretation.
Kind of like music, certain keys of music produce the same feelings in everybody. Like songs in the key of A will have this angelic God Bless America feel to them, regardless of who you are and what, you know. So that's maybe the things that you're seeing with the third eye. You're actually getting the feeling, the smell of, the taste of, and everything comes with the vision at the same time.
Yeah, certain amount of truth to that, Rick. He says the third eye manifests as a result of the vibratory interaction between the force of the soul working through the pineal gland and the forces of the personality working through the pituitary body. These negative and positive forces interact, and when potent enough, produce the light in the head. So you have the energy around the pituitary gland and the pineal gland cooperating together to produce the light of the head. And then he says, when this happens, a disciple learns to see the light in all forms. I've given some classes before on seeing the aura and the etheric body that's around the physical body, which the etheric body is easy to see. For those of you who haven't done this, we can do this right now. What you do, right, is you put your thumbs together like this, hold them about 1/4 inch apart, and in the background, you need a background what's preferably a light colored wall with that's all the same color. If you have multicolored background, it doesn't work very good. And you put your thumbs together like this, and then you slowly pull them apart, and you look at the space between the two thumbs, and you get your thumbs about 1/4 inch apart. Yeah, part of the computer screen will work for this, and you can see that film. Just look at the empty space between the two thumbs, or two fingers, two parts of your body, and you'll see a film. The film is about a couple millimeters away from your physical body. You may see a little bit of a blue light there also. Okay. Now, everybody do that and see the film. Those of you who've been to my symposium, I've done that a number of times, and just about everybody in the audience sees it. And I was teaching a seminary class one time when I was in the Mormon church in my younger days, and I said to the students, you guys want to learn to see your spirits? They said, well, yeah. And so I showed them that, and I said, that's your spirit you're seeing there. And boy, they thought that was cool. They went home and told their parents, and the next week I was released from my seminary job. That was just not in the Mormon program to teach anything like that. But anyway, I was glad to finally escape that religion. But
with the practice, you can see various shades of blue in the etheric, and it's helpful for diagnosing things.
yeah, but he says a disciple learns to see the light that is in all forms. Now, you not only have that light, because you have a pretty strong life force, your body projects the light a little stronger than other forms, but even a rock or your desk or whatever, your computer, they all have etheric forms. And so you might practice just looking at different forms, like look at your television set when it's off, look at a book, and what you do is you look at the edge of it. Yeah, Rick's showing us something there. You look at the edge of a form, and right at the edge, you look at that empty space, and you can see the etheric double of that form if you look long enough, if your third eye is open to any degree.
By the law of correspondence, there's a corresponding form at every plane.
Yeah. Yeah, and all the three planes anyway. Yeah. Okay. So by means of the third eye, the soul accomplishes three main activities. First of all, he says it's an eye of vision. He sees divinity in all forms. Just as the physical eye registers forms, so does the spiritual eye register illumination from within those forms, which illumination indicates a specific state of being. Now, this takes a little bit more advanced disciple to see something like that, to actually register the illumination within all forms. So you look at a rock, well, what's the illumination in that rock, you can actually sense certain things. When we were moving this little statue of a little schoolgirl that we were going to put in our backyard, and I was moving it, and I was telling my wife I picked up an interesting vibration from this, like it was alive, and it was kind of happy to be here. And she said, "Oh, that's probably because my mom used to talk to this little girl statue all the time, and she talked to it like it was alive." And I thought, well, that's probably why. She's probably had some of her energy transferred into this now that she's passed away, and maybe she's actually using it as a mechanism of contact to kind of keep in touch with us now that she's passed. Who knows? So anyway, that's so anyway, the intelligence within the forms themselves, that's something interesting. I've never heard anyone really talk about contacting intelligence in inanimate forms, but I'm sure that we do it to some extent. We have a number of psychics claim to be able to pick up a handkerchief somebody used and pick up information from the person that owned that handkerchief or whatever. So we have that type of, some people have that type of gift. Okay, the third eye, the second thing with the third eye is it's the controlling factor in magical work. And the third is it has a destructive energy flowing through the third eye. And rather than go into these this week, I think we'll continue this next week because we don't have time to discuss these last two ones completely. So we'll leave it at that. But and finish up this class next week, hopefully. Any questions before we can close up here? Well, we missed Susie when we started our class here. How are you doing, Susan?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good.
Oh, real good. Okay, so we'll end with a short meditation, and then we'll dismiss till next week. Next week we'll have the class at 10 o'clock p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Let's end with a song of eternal life, and let's focus on, first of all, we'll focus on ourselves, and then we will focus on anyone in the group that needs healing energy. So first of all, as we go through this, focus on bringing the healing energy down to you, because everybody needs a shot. Like I'm in good health, but I could always use a shot of energy and give me more power to accomplish things. Okay, the Song of Eternal Life. Sound the Om first. Om. If you don't have it in front of you or have it memorized, just follow along with me. We thank you, Father, Mother, Spirit, for the energy of life which streams from universal source to us. For the life that circulates through each atom and cell, permeating our entire bodies and minds, bringing health and vitality to all of our living parts. Now sound the Om, visualizing anything that is not productive in your body, not helping your body, as leaving your body. Om. We bask in this life. We feel the life. We are the life which knows not corruption, the life which makes all things new, the life which always is. We feel the life from the toes to the top of our heads and give thanks for its abundance. We praise and love our bodies and all their parts for receiving this life and spirit and source. We praise body, mind, soul, and spirit for receiving without ceasing. Now feel this universal source of life energy, the life of which we're all connected, streaming to us with no interference. If the life comes to us with no interference, then we will have health and vitality. All of us have some interference, but concentrate on the interference dissolving. Now visualize those in our group who need extra energy, extra health, extra vitality, extra healing power to receive it. Visualize this life coming from you and going to where it's needed most within this group. Om, 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 om. Continue to visualize saying the Om this time. Ah, aha. You sense the life. Ah, you feel the life. Ah, you feel the life going through you, energizing you. Ooh. You feel the power of the life. Ooh. Ooh. You feel the love of life. You feel your physical body, the physical bodies of all in the group, reaching their perfect form and purpose. Mm-hmm. Now we'll sound the Om and have a short period of silence where we feel a connection to the divine life. Om. Okay, good group today. Glad you all showed up and look forward to seeing you in next week. Any comments or questions before we call it to a close?
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Anybody float off their chair or anything?
Mm-hmm.
Jill floated off her chair. Well, good for you, Jill.
Just a little bit.
Okay. Well, we'll see you all you guys soon, and we'll be thinking of all those ideas that come from the higher spheres and share them with us next week. So we will see you next week.
Thank you, JJ.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.